Good evening and good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a real pleasure to be to have this audience here and to be back with you again for another night. My name is Alec Wright. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at GSV Labs, and welcome back to our second AI Pitch and Place night, our third virtual pitch and place, as we're trying to keep bringing really amazing early stage founders to the forefront, even while we're in lockdown and unable to gather, the way we traditionally like to gather. Really quickly before we get started, I want to share a little bit of context on, what it is that we're doing here and what we're hoping to accomplish tonight. As I said, this is our Pioneer Pitch Night on artificial intelligence. We launched this series last month, where we had hundreds of early stage AI companies apply to come and pitch, to join the community. And we had such a wide variety of companies that we decided we needed to split it into multiple pitch nights. We did a seed stage, early stage pitch night last month, and now we're focused more on the Series A and growth-oriented artificial intelligence companies here tonight. So you'll be hearing all of them, in a couple moments. But before we get started, I want to provide a little bit of context on, what it is we've been doing here. So again, last week we had a seed stage pitch night which was won by BlastPoint, an incredible early stage AI company focused on transforming the customer service experience. And now we'll see kind of that next stage in maturity of companies, all brought to you by GSV Labs. And what is GSV Labs? We're an innovation platform based in Silicon Valley in Boston. We've supported an in-person community of over 800 startups over the past couple of years. They've raised over $500 million. And historically, we were always running in-person innovation and entrepreneurship events to bring the community together. With the lockdown and social distancing of COVID, we've moved that online. And fortunately, we're really well equipped to do that as a result of tools and technologies like the Passport platform. GSV Passport is our online innovation community. Right now, you're on Passport watching this event, and you're joining 22,000 other entrepreneurs from around the world, hundreds of investors, mentors, and as a founder, you get to access nearly $1 million in discounted tools or technology inside as a member of the community. So if you haven't checked it out, we highly suggest you go and take a look. But again, that brings us back to, why we're here tonight, the artificial intelligence pitch night. As I said, we're going to be hearing from a great group of kind of seed Series A plus companies in the space. But before we get started with that, we're going to have a quick panel on the insights and trends that are driving the early stage AI space, moderated by our CEO, Nikhil Sinha, and with an amazing group of panelists and ultimately judges. And once that panel is over, the startups will be competing. And what they're competing for is pretty interesting. The grand prize is $2,000 in cash and 2 free memberships for 1 year to the Passport ecosystem. We'll also provide fast track access to the United States Entrepreneurship World Cup, East or West Coast finals, and a really, really exciting and unique benefit to the grand prize winner tonight, which will be a one-on-one mentoring session with our very own Perry Wu, who's one of the judges tonight, who's an incredible AI thought leader and a partner at the AI Fund. And then ultimately, we'll also be giving out a People's Choice Award. And it's a great reminder that all of our audience members, you can vote, you can chat. Please, we want to hear what you think of the various startups, and that will dictate, who we ultimately provide this People's Choice Award to. And I want to give a quick shout out and another thank you to the AI Fund, an incredible organization that's partnered with us on these past 2 nights. And it's really been great to get their expertise around the table as judges and as panelists and speakers as we explore these kind of ever-changing topics. And with that, I would love to move it to our panel. It's my pleasure to introduce Nikhil Sinha, the CEO of GSV Labs, who will be starting off the conversation.
Thank you, Alec, and welcome everyone to Pioneer Pitch Night, and a very warm welcome to today's judges and panelists, Perry Wu, partner of the AI Fund, Jennifer Jordan, venture investor and entrepreneur in residence at Techstars, and Juan Scarlett, senior advisor at GSV Labs, who's heading up all of our venture investing initiatives. I'm going to start us off with a few questions for the panelists, and then we'll open it up for audience questions later in the discussion. Audience members, if you have questions, please use the chat feature and those questions will be passed on to me. We begin then with the panelists. We've all been hearing about the slowdown in venture investing activity because of the pandemic and the resulting economic uncertainty. By some accounts, venture investment activity dropped about 17% in Q1 of 2020 from the previous quarter, Q4 of 2019. Early stage investing was particularly impacted with about a 23% drop. And by all accounts, we should see a further softening of venture activity in Q2 of 2020. I'd like to begin with your experience of the impact of the pandemic on venture investing in general and investing in the AI sector in particular. And what are you seeing regarding the availability of capital and the evolving investment terms? And as we answer the questions, please also provide us a brief introduction to your fund or current investing initiatives for the audience. Perry, let's start with you.
Yeah, hi, Perry Wu. A little bit about AI Fund. We're about $175 million fund focused on very early stage investments in companies, anywhere from an idea to companies sort of fully validated and about to enter revenues. We do about majority of our investments sort of in that group, and then we'll do about 10% companies that don't necessarily fit that profile. But the bulk of our work is just really helping entrepreneurs get from 0 to 1, which is not, as everyone here probably knows, is not an easy path and full of potholes and challenges for entrepreneurs. We just think it's probably the place we can add the most impact and help steer entrepreneurs in the right direction, as well as hopefully help them launch into an investment, which I think gets us to the next question. In terms of softness to the market, I think it's a little bit of an adjustment for VCs to invest in this new environment. We really rely on investing in people, and so I think without having a face-to-face meeting with someone, it does change the dynamic quite a bit. You sort of lose a lot of the intuitive feeling about an entrepreneur, and having as many cycles to really sort of sit down with them and understand what they're about and why they're doing what they're doing. So I would say, the net of is we're still, I think people are still making investments, especially at the earliest stages. There's a little bit of a sort of reality in the market is that I think most VCs are focused first on their own portfolio companies and making sure that they're fully funded. And so, people want to make sure that they have runway for 12 to 24 months. And so I think a lot of focus for the later stages has been really on that. So, just natural for people to have their priorities change during this downturn. I think that's also taken away from early stage investment, but I'm fairly optimistic and upbeat. I think there's a lot of money out there. People still want to write checks. So I think, from my standpoint, it's still business as usual. And like it always has been, good companies will still get funded.
Thanks. And have you seen any softening of the deal flow, or are you still seeing the same level of startup activity that you were seeing pre the pandemic?
Well, it's hard for me to say. Everything kind of goes in waves. So I talking to other folks in the industry, I'd say, people feel that there's there's less activity. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have been taking advantage of this time with their family and kids, and probably been a little bit more lazy in terms of getting things off the ground. And it's not a bad time to spend with your families. I'm hopeful that once kids go back to school and whatnot, then we'll see the activity kick up again. But yeah, I mean, I'd say certainly a little softening, but not a huge difference.
Great, thanks. Jennifer, your experience about the state of VC funding and the level of startup activity.
So sure, I'm Jennifer Jordan. I'm an early stage VC here in the Boston, Cambridge area. I'm currently working on a new investment thesis that's around companies that are specifically focused on AI trust and transparency. So that's the entire infrastructure stack that is growing up to support application-specific AI and model development within enterprise. We think that market will grow to look a lot like the cybersecurity market grew, and then aggregate into platforms over time. So that was a little bit about me. I also am in the EIR in the Techstars Boston program, and I work with the Techstars Longevity Accelerator down in DC, where we see a number of AI-focused companies specifically working on aging and age tech. And then in terms of your question, what are we seeing? I think we saw in the first couple months that people did exactly what Perry said. VCs hunkered down, they looked deeply at their own portfolios, and they worked on making sure that those portfolios had capital. My old firm made sure that people were set up to go forward through this pandemic. And I think we saw a lot of that activity. And then there was a sort of learning curve of how are we going to do this stuff totally virtually, and can we build enough trust with an entrepreneur when we haven't seen them in person? And since that time, what we've seen in early stage funds here in the Boston area is that deals are getting done. It does help to have that warm intro and someone that you know, and to be really, really clearly aligned with what that VC's investment thesis is or where they're looking right now also makes a difference, because you don't have time to feel any of that stuff out right now when you're just coming through video.
Great, thanks. Juan, let me turn to you, same question.
Sure, great. Thanks for having me out. My name is Juan Scarlett. As mentioned, currently working with GSV Labs on several early stage investment efforts. I previously led the investment efforts for Nimble Ventures, which is an early stage fund based here in San Francisco, focused primarily on enterprise, fintech, and healthcare companies, including some that use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics technologies. In addition, I'm also working with a fair amount of early stage startups, particularly on financing strategies. So I have experienced this a lot actually over the last 4 to 5 months. And I can certainly tell you and certainly agree with Perry and Jennifer's thoughts that companies are absolutely seeing elongated timelines with regards to their financing efforts. And we're certainly seeing less appetite for sort of new early stage investments at this point, which is again consistent with what they said as well. Many VCs were started off looking inward for the first few months of the pandemic and economic crisis, and have since now started to figure out how to do business in this sort of new paradigm, and figuring out how to really get to know early stage companies virtually. And so that also bore itself out in first half venture financing numbers. We saw a significant decline in early stage numbers, but a less significant decline in sort of more mature companies. And really the funding numbers were really driven by the more mature companies with mega rounds. Within AI specifically, I would say it was slightly healthier or significantly healthier than the broader sectors in AI. Once you remove a large round like Waymo from Q1 and Q2, which is about $3 billion of funding in those 2 quarters, funding for AI companies was virtually flat, I think, in the first half for the 2 quarters, which is not bad considering considering the disruptions we saw in the environment in general.
Thanks, Juan. Couple of weeks ago, when we had the first edition of this of our AI pitch night, we had Andrew Ng, the founder of the AI Fund, and had a terrific conversation with him about the transformative potential of artificial intelligence. Let me ask each of you in turn about some of the areas or opportunities in AI that you're most excited about, and what do you think the impact of the pandemic has been, or generally on the AI adoption curve? Let me start with you, Jennifer.
Sure. I guess the first thing I would say is that you have a combination of people who are more circumspect of applications, and then you have areas where the people see the path forward as greater automation. So I see financial services companies leaning in to AI applications, trying to get their model risk management teams up to speed to deal with these new model building techniques. They are leaning into automation generally. I think we see a lot of interest around supply chain, demand prediction, things that got disrupted this time around. People are starting to look at applications in that area around manufacturing. So I think we'll see people lean in to these applications as we go forward. And I think that's good news. At the same time, there's a lot of room here for people to be very selective and take their time. Budgets are constrained. That's also a factor.
Thanks, Jennifer. Juan?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd say generally, it's a little boring, but given how many things AI and ML technologies can do. But I'd say, for me at least, some of the more interesting areas are sort of enterprise data aggregation, predictive data insights, and analytics continue to be pretty interesting areas, particularly for adoption. I think we're seeing enterprises already using these technologies to improve marketing efficiency, sales productivity, better capital allocation, as Jennifer mentioned, demand forecasting as well. And those are things that enterprises are ready to adopt today. And again, as budgets are constrained, we will likely see enterprises continue to utilize those technologies to more efficiently manage their businesses during such a strenuous time. And I think going forward, I think we'll likely, some other areas will potentially see some interesting adoption, particularly as it relates to this pandemic. Is obviously in healthcare. We've seen already diagnostics and testing be more an area of interest, and I will see some AI technologies moving to the forefront there, and then certainly in drug discovery and development as well.
Thanks, Juan. Perry, what areas of focus does the AI Fund have, and what areas are you most excited about?
I was going to say whatever Andrew said last week, I agree with. I think our general philosophy is, AI is sort of a very pervasive technology. So, first and foremost, just like, the internet, it's very difficult to predict how it's going to be applied in an innovative way. I'd say that, in general, we try to keep an open mind that it's a very enabling technology, and but the problems themselves are really sort of the lead to any opportunity. So, in essence, it does open the doors to create new solutions, which we're probably most interested in, as opposed to, making something incrementally a little bit better. I think it's very difficult for companies to get their arms around and grasp. But we do sort of look at large horizontals where maybe that incremental improvement does help quite a bit. And so, things like non-discrete, image, monitoring, figuring out how that might influence quality of a product or a process sort of in farming and whatnot. So we do look at a lot of those things. The other area is just sort of, coaching networks where AI can act as sort of a way to offset human capital to make processes much more, much better and just more efficient. And so those sort of a couple general themes, but in essence, I think it's very difficult to figure out what the killer applications for AI will be in the future. I think, like most cases, when we see it surprises us. So we're constantly talking to folks that have expertise and they apply the technology in a way we never would have thought of.
Thanks.
If I can jump
yeah.
in, I would say, echoing that, a couple of the specific things we've seen that I think are interesting are some more focus on continuous learning and end learning. So Perry just mentioned using vision in a horizontal way, and we're starting to see specific applications around things like defect detection in ways that it wasn't done before, but built into the manufacturing line, like Neurala systems. LumenDX had just raised its seed round for an application that supports primary care physicians for dermatology. Her advantage is in the way that she's been scaling data so rapidly in the US. That makes a big difference because you can gain more accuracy. So when you start to see the applications, you kind of you feel where something is going that's novel. And the other thing I think I'm seeing is that there's an increase in appreciation of the need for greater management of the software over its life cycle, and to think end to end, from starting to assess your models for bias and explainability early on to how do we manage them post-production, what are we doing for audit, what are we doing for compliance. Those things are starting to have more interest, and you're seeing both developers of applications and adopters think about those problems and look for solutions to solve them versus having every time to build custom.
Thanks. Just a reminder to the audience, questions, please, through the chat feature on the platform. Let me ask one more question, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. Beginning with you, Juan, 2 or 3 points that you think AI company founders should be keeping in mind in this environment, either in terms of tracking their metrics, building their business, or how they should be thinking about fundraising.
Sure. Well, to me, I mean, founders should always be focused on what problem they're solving, and obviously creating the best solution for their customer to solve that particular problem. With AI companies, it's in doing that, then you also need to be able to communicate to your customer, why your particular solution is more effective or efficient at doing so, and why your training data is better than other potential competitors. Does your model run faster? Is it running on less data? Is your output more accurate, and why? Being able to explain all those things effectively to your customer is pretty important. And then on the value side, making sure that all those things lead to your customer, either generating more revenue or spending less money, or ideally both. To me, those are the most important things for all startups, but for AI, it's you're adding in, why your model actually is more effective, and really giving that additional layer of detail to the customer that other companies don't necessarily have to do.
Yeah, thanks. Hari, any words of wisdom for the startups in our community and the audience?
Yeah, you get what you pay for. Yeah, I think, to me, again, I think to something that Juan said, which I sort of would agree with, is just, ultimately the problem that you're solving is the most important thing. So AI and ML is sort of a big buzzword these days. I've seen it in so many pitches, but ultimately it doesn't really matter if you're not solving a meaningful problem in a big, in a big market space. And so I think a lot of people just assume if they put those coin words somewhere in their presentation that everyone gets excited about it. But, ultimately we want to solve big, thorny problems that lead to big companies. So, the technology is, part of the equation, but it's not the main equation. The main equation is, are you really solving a customer's problem that they're willing to give you dollars out of their budget to solve? Ultimately, if there's 100 people solving that problem, and it comes down to like, is your solution slightly better because of ML AI? That's not as interesting to us. We're looking for companies that are solving problems that could never have been solved before because of AI, either because maybe it was too human intensive, or analytics alone wasn't enough, or machine learning wasn't enough. So I'd sort of encourage people to really, suffer through the process of like, is this a problem that you want to spend the next 4 or 5 years of your life solving, and approach it from that direction.
Thanks.
4 to 5
Jennifer,
to
any
10.
thoughts?
Yeah, so I would say 4 to 5 to 10 years. And I think I agree on the issue of you really have to very deeply understand or clearly define what your problem is. And it has to be a problem that's valuable for customers. And so for early stage companies, I think one of the most important things for me is that the faster you can get to really framing that problem and where the customer value lives and articulate that to me, the better. You may have room to go somewhere bigger later, but that first foothold and how you're going to get there is really important. And the second thing that I'm seeing is sometimes people not really having a good understanding of who they're building for, who the user is of the product. And particularly within this sort of AI value chain, that makes a big difference. Like, are you building on the developer side, or are you building on the business application side? And you have to be able to tell me where that business value lies in either case, and then be building the right product for the right user.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Alison Hastings in the audience. She asks, with how pervasive AI is becoming in business, what is your perspective on more transparency in the way that algorithms make decisions? Jennifer, you want to start us off on that?
Sure, since that's clearly in the wheelhouse of the things I'm interested in seeing entrepreneurs solve. What we see is the companies that care first about having greater transparency or more accountability in their algorithms are those that are already regulated. So in insurance, financial services, and healthcare, where you've had to provide explanation of automated decisioning before, you're seeing those people try to get their hands around this, and you see regulators in those sectors leaning in to understand how are we going to assess and evaluate whether a company has the right gates in their process and are doing the best practices for greater transparency and accountability with their models. And I think you will see that flow over to other side. The other place where you're seeing it is where around consumers and consumer data, where GDPR and CCPA have had some impact, and people are thinking about how do we use this data, what's coming in to inform the model. And that gets into other areas of care about in terms of model performance, where you're seeing anybody who's thinking about deploying to an edge device or to a medical device is thinking a lot now about, if AI is going to be in that device, how robust is it? How secure is it? How subject is it to drift? And how will we manage upgrades, both of the model and the model in conjunction with hardware? People are starting to, if they weren't thinking about those things a couple of years ago, they're thinking about them. So I think we'll see a lean in there.
Great, thanks. Perry, Juan, any thoughts on the issue of transparency in AI systems?
Yeah, it's a problem. I think it's inevitable. It's all based on the data you gather. We actually have a couple of projects in the space. One is on the data itself, and the sort of integrity of that data. The other one is in sort of the recruiting space, but it's almost impossible to not have bias in your data, because whatever data you bring onto your platform, and usually typically it's just hard to collect the data, it will skew the results of the AI ML. So that's why, ultimately, the algorithm has to change over time. And so, we're certainly advocates of creating systems where, companies are socially responsible for taking out that bias, or at least working towards that. But, it's hard to say whether it's a high enough agenda on CIOs' plates and CTOs' plates that they're going to spend the money there. I think that's ultimately our big question mark for whether this one project will succeed or not, is, until it becomes a huge problem in the public's mind, companies don't tend to do a lot about it. So, there'll certainly be leaders in the market. The question is whether it'll be mainstream, in 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. The analogy I use is, DDoS, when it first started, was a threat to companies, but no one ever thought they'd get attacked. And until it proliferated enough, and denial of service happened to a lot of folks, did everyone start buying the product. But and it'll be the same with bias in data, until it's brought up enough in the news. Hard to say whether it'll become part of a budget for enterprises. We do know a lot of big companies that are taking it seriously and trying to do things about it. I think certainly within the financial community, it poses a fairly big problem if a whole set of population can't get a loan because they're, sort of racially biased from the beginning based on the data. So we definitely think it's a big social problem. I think for AI Fund, we want to build, companies that are making a change to the world, and we think this is an important topic. Whether we're successful with our companies or not, we're hopeful that we can move the ball forward.
Thanks. We have another question from the audience. I think we've got time for one more. This is a live question from Shreya Deaton. Shreya, are you on?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Hi, judges. Thank you so much for all your valuable insights. It's been really interesting to listen to all the topics you guys are covering. With more and more AI solutions being adopted by large enterprises, what advice do you have for early stage founders trying to get enterprise attention?
Great, thank you, Shreya. Juan, you want to start with?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would certainly just go back to what I would have mentioned earlier, which is just that the biggest deal is making sure that you're solving a real problem that the enterprise has today, or one that you expect them to have in the very near future, and then making sure you're targeting the right user in the enterprise to bring them your solution. Those two things are absolutely critical. And as I think both Perry and Jennifer mentioned earlier as well, you see a lot of companies spend a lot of time building these very cool, very, very interesting machine learning models, and it's not really clear who they're building them for, what problem they're solving with them. But they are cool, they look interesting, and they sound cool and look great on investor decks. But it's not clear what problem they're solving, or who is actually going to use them in the enterprise world. So if you focus on those two things, I think you'll end up leading you down the path, at least in the right direction. That's what I focus on mostly.
Thanks, Juan. Jennifer, Perry, any last thoughts on enterprise applications for AI?
In terms of getting attention for enterprises, it's it's really about making sure you have a problem worth their attention. That's the easiest way. That's not always the obvious thing, or the world changes, but there are, there's, you've always heard the saying, whether you're a vitamin or painkiller. So the best thing is just do the work up front, make sure that you're solving something significant where you can provide a painkiller. I think a lot of companies skip that. They don't do enough work up front, where they end up thinking that they've got the right solution, and they you always find someone that says, oh, that's a pain point that I'm willing to solve, or that I'm willing to buy. But it takes quite a bit of extra work to determine whether it's number 3 on their priority list versus number 4. If it's, unfortunately, if you're solving number 4 and they only have 3 things that they can solve, then you're not on their budget. You always get pushed out with enterprises, and that's honestly, that's like the worst place to be, because you're being given really good positive feedback that you're solving something important to them, but you're never within reach of a check. So I would say that's the most important thing. If you're already down the path, you've sort of built the product and whatnot, it's really, you do whatever you can to get in the doors of an enterprise. You use relationships to get in there, get deals done. It's part of what we do. It's a momentum game. But even in that process, you should still always be in sort of the discovery mode to figure out if you should morph your messaging and your product slightly to move it from number 4 to number 3 on the priority list. So I think that's a good question you asked. It's not always the easiest thing to solve.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add with that. Perry said it so well about the really, banging on the doors and then having many conversations. And I agree with him. A lot of times I see people haven't had enough of those conversations. And so one of the things I would tell you is to really tune your ear to the voice of that customer and user, right? What are they really saying to you? Is this really a must-have? Perry said painkiller. And then where is it in the priority stack? And are you talking to the right person who will ultimately be the user and then be the one who can buy it, who has budget to put behind it? So
thanks, everyone. Thanks, Perry, Jennifer, and Juan, for that great discussion. And now it's time for the pitch night, and over to you, Alec.
Wonderful. Again, a huge thanks to Nikhil, Juan, Perry, and Jennifer. But our judges are just getting started. We're now kind of moving to the main event, and it's so amazing to hear these perspectives on how AI is evolving. And I love this notion of AI is like the internet, and if 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we would have been asked, what's the value of the internet and where's it going? You have to kind of look at the operators and the entrepreneurs to see where value is being created. And I think that's exactly what we're going to try and do here over the next 45 minutes. So we have 6 Series A companies that'll be pitching momentarily. It's everything, every industry across the board. The one common denominator is using artificial intelligence to try and solve kind of big, hairy, interesting challenges. And, as a reminder, they are competing for a $2,000 first prize, as well as a included Passport membership with that, as well as a one-on-one mentoring session with Perry, who we just heard of. So a really interesting and kind of exciting, opportunity for all of our presenting startups. And as a reminder, everyone, please, judge, vote, score, comment, ask questions, all of the above. And you'll have an opportunity in the Q&A with each company to get an audience question in, as well as if there's anything that's just kind of really pressing. And we really want to hear your thoughts on these different companies so we can award that Audience Choice Award. One final reminder of who our judges are. We have Juan Scarlett, Jennifer Jordan, and Perry Wu, who you all heard of. And with that, we're ready to get going. Each startup is going to have 4 minutes to pitch, a couple minutes for Q&A. You'll notice some notes at the bottom of your screen as it's going with how much time that's left. If we have anyone running over, you might see me pop in and move into Q&A, but we just want to keep it a fast-moving, dynamic conversation. So, with that, it's we're excited and ready for our first startup, and we'll get started with Galaxy AI.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is Jaz Magoo from Galaxy AI. I'm the CEO and founder. And we provide AI automated vehicle inspection using artificial intelligence. Right. So have you been in a car accident? Apart from it being extremely stressful, you also go through the experience of filing a claim, submitting it, and getting it approved, and then finally getting your vehicle repaired. So that's one piece that unfortunately also today takes a lot of time, is manually intensive, and also expensive for insurance carriers. When you have an accident, you call up your insurance carrier, you spend a lot of time over the phone, then you get your vehicle inspected, you finally get it repaired, and this entire process can take from 2 to 4 weeks, so sometimes an entire month, and it can also cost insurance carriers $150 per claim. What that means is that globally, auto insurance carriers are spending $80 billion in just getting the claims estimated and adjusted. So this is, a big problem for them and also our market opportunity. So we provide an automated solution where the user is using our app or insurance carrier's app, and it is connected to our AI algorithm models. They submit the images and they get the answer in real time, as in where the damage has been detected and identified on the vehicle, what part is damaged, and also then connected to the claim estimating cost. So we provide it in real time, and we reduce expenses for insurance carriers down to 75%. Now let's take a look at how it works. As an end user, they select the make, model, year of the vehicle, they can scan the VIN, they submit the accident information, and then all the AI model really needs is one good image. So the user submits, they decide to submit, okay, I want to submit the front left part of my vehicle. And this user is submitting 2 images. One is at an optimal distance, but another one can be a close-up, depending on what kind of damage it is, especially if it's fine scratch or scuff. And this is where this is important. An optimal distance, good brightness, no glare, less reflections. And this is all monitored and analyzed by our AI in real time, where it also detects PII data. So in case where the image was an extreme close-up, there the user is alerted that please adjust the distance at which you capture the image. So our app is capturing high quality images from the get-go, and then addressing the transparency angle. It's telling the user exactly what kind of damage it is, on what part of vehicle, and what part of the image is actually identified as damage. And then it correlates it to the decision of if the part should be repaired or replaced, and then what's the labor cost or part replacement cost, which we connect to third-party databases and also third-party costs. So why did we start this company? We started it in 2015. And in 2016, I was approached by one of the tier one insurance carriers that said this is a big problem for them because they are sending humans and expert claim appraisers to assess every vehicle in person. So I put together a team of world-class experts with expertise in deep learning, computer vision, and we have also been recognized by Gartner, Navarca, and all the top analysts that are covering the insurance industry and market as the cool vendor in this space. We stand out from the competition is one, we have built our own proprietary data, and we have also gathered high quality images through our live deployment and through a process of selecting high quality. But also we have automatically tagged our images. And we have additional markets where we have auto body shops, vehicle manufacturers for underwriting and rental and car inspection. I would like to end our presentation saying that today our AI solution is being used not only in North America, but Latin America, Australia, Europe, and also Asia, because we are among the very few companies that provide the solution globally. And with that, if you do end up having a car accident, we at least hope that using our AI solution, your repair process is as simple as a click of a button. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that incredible pitch, and really exciting to see how the age-old practice of fender benders are getting transformed with artificial intelligence. We'd love to throw it over to any of our judges to get started. Maybe Juan, do you have any questions to kick it off?
I think he's on mute.
Great. Yes, I have a few questions, and thank you for the presentation. I guess one, I'd like to understand how this impacts the auto body shop in the process, the claim process. Fortunately, I haven't been in a car accident in a number of years, knock on wood. But when I was, I recall effectively contacting my insurance company and them having me go to an auto body shop that was near me that they had a partnership with. And then the auto body shop then worked with the insurance company to decide what needed to be repaired, draw up an estimation, and then actually get the work done. You appear to be taking them out of that part of this process for most insurance companies. But I assume they would still be completing the work. So I guess where is the money being saved if the consumer is just going directly to auto body shop?
Right. You're right. Consumer has two options. Either they can go to an auto body shop, but again, with auto body shops, it depends on if an in-network auto body shop is near the consumer or not. Second, they can also opt out. They're like, I don't want to do all that work. Why don't you send me someone why don't you send someone who can evaluate the vehicle or just tell me a claim appraisal? So some users also opt for that. And then some insurance carriers have set up their own estimating centers. So in case of an auto body shop, we provide our solution to the auto body shop. Especially in COVID, we have seen that auto body shops have become more aware. They do not want the customer to come in twice. Once to get the estimate done, and then second to get the actual repair done. And it's they are losing business like that. For them, this is also a lead generation tool where they are providing our link on their website. So we are actually talking to some of the big auto body shop chains for implementing the solution. And as far as it goes from the insurance carrier side, they want to control the estimate process as much as possible because they want to keep the estimate as low as possible. Auto body shop wants to keep the estimate as high as possible. So it's sort of, the right balance. Yeah, right. That's where the AI provides the objectiveness.
Okay. Thank you. That's a great answer. I'll let Perry or Jennifer ask any questions they have.
Jess, could you talk to where you are in terms of revenue to date and commercial traction?
Right. Because this is live streamed, I cannot, say about the specific numbers.
Can you give me some sense of, are you at recurring, repeatable? What the model looks like?
Yes. So, it did take us some time to get to the recurring, repeatable revenue numbers, but despite COVID, I would say this year we deployed our solution live with a major insurance carrier. And in fact, We have a couple of live more deployments lined up, as well as pilots with tier one insurance carriers. But our solution has been live since 2017 in form of beta deployments.
Okay. And then one follow-up, do you see competition in this space? You're clearly one of the forerunners, but this is a space that people who are doing computer vision kind of looked at early. Could you talk about a little bit what you've seen, who's fallen away and who's still out there, who's real?
Right. On the surface, it may look like an easy problem to solve, but what we have seen that even with just one insurance company's data, that's not complete in itself, because they have a lot of images, but only 10% of them are actually usable. And actually, when I say usable, I mean actually used to train the algorithm, because they're high quality images. Most of that data is actually bad quality. So that's why, it has taken us also to develop the solution. And so now if someone does decide to develop the solution, it's going to be, a few years that it'll take them, and, obviously a few $1 million.
Great. Thank you.
So
I think we have time for one quick question, Perry.
yeah, just you said 5 to 10 million savings for an insurance carrier, and what's the number of insurance carriers there are in the world?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last part of the question.
How many insurance carriers are there?
Right. To give you an idea, there are around 800 auto insurance carriers in the US alone. So, the market is quite big, and our market calculation is around 80 billion every year globally.
Thank you. I think we have time for one quick question from the audience. We have a question from Regina. Do you have any metrics that describe how your AI improves over time, and how kind of your image precision has improved since you've started this effort?
So we, again, I can't give the exact metrics out, but we have seen the accuracy definitely improve over the years. And we track, our AI accuracy through your F1 score, which we find the combination of precision and recall, the most optimal, balance for measuring the accuracy of the AI for damage detection. And there are several levels of measuring the accuracy. It's a damage detection, it's a part detection and identification classification. It's a repair replace decision accuracy. It is the claim estimate accuracy itself. So we deploy several different models, and for every model, we measure the accuracy independently.
So computer vision is only one part of the, one part of the pie as you're analyzing the right course for someone. We
use combination of computer vision, deep learning, Bayesian, probabilistic algorithms. Yes, it's a whole concoction.
Whole stack. Well, thank you so much. Really exciting to learn more about Galaxy AI, and can't thank you enough for being with us tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you again. And with that, we are ready to transition to our second pitch. We're going to keep moving here. We're going to try and keep everyone as on time as possible. Although, we're always excited when we have a lot of great, judge questions. But with that, we are ready to move on to Contract Wrangler. Hi, Neil. I think you're ready to go, as long as you put into present mode.
There we go. Can folks see my screen?
You're coming through well. If you could just put into present.
It says I'm screen sharing.
Yeah, I mean full screen presentation mode. We're down at the bottom right. In your actual PowerPoint, as opposed to.
Got it.
You're set.
Perfect. Well, excited to be here. Could folks see they can see the opening slide?
Yeah, you're coming through clearly.
All right, great. So real quick, everyone's in a tough economic time right now. And I think it's important to put all the companies into, the economic perspective that basically their clients are facing today. I would say, if you analogize your company to your living room, this was what you'd wanted before the COVID times. And this is really the look you'd want to have now, which is, where's all my money? Where am I going to get extra money from? And that's really where Contract Wrangler comes in, is we are helping companies get extra money because the economic times are tight right now. It's a good message even when economic times are good, but it's an especially relevant message right now. How do I get extra cash flow? How do I optimize my business? So if you look at where companies are spending money, it's pretty straightforward. It's through your contracts. Like 80% of your spend is through contracts. And those who are on the line here who invest in SaaS, they know this. Everything is SaaS these days. It used to be Fred down the hall would do work. Now I've got 57 different SaaS contracts I'm using instead. So I've got contracts that are dictating all my spend. And how do we make the contracts? We get the team together, all the different stakeholders. We ask them what they want. It all gets written up in some kind of special programming language known as legalese. Everyone's seen this before. And unfortunately, everyone's seen this before as well, which is what happens 9 months later. The contract is in a file cabinet. People forget all the important details, and they're on to the next activity. And that's really how incentives are set up in companies. I have been a general counsel at multiple companies. I face this problem because basically, if you don't know what's in your contracts, you're going to go lose a lot of money. And the old story about Willie Sutton, why did he rob the banks? That's where the money is. Today, where would you look for the money? It would be in your contracts. And this has been studied externally by KPMG, E&Y, industry associations, et cetera. If you don't know what's in your contracts, you're going to go lose money on it. And drilling down, I know that's high level. Let's drill down to the particular operating roles. Who do I call for renewal? When do I get credit if an SLA isn't hit? Every single detail about your spend, your savings, et cetera, is on your agreements. And it really stretches across your entire company, and really every type of company for that matter. So as a general counsel, I was working to solve this. Solutions I found in the market were either A, what I call store and pray, or B, I could buy what was called a contract management system, which essentially was an empty database. And what it missed was who's going to read all the contracts, figure out all the details, and get them in the database. And that, unfortunately, is what contract management has historically been. So what have we done? We've applied artificial intelligence. We have built a machine learning system to read the contracts and understand them. And we actually have attorneys in the loop. So we are automatically QCing the results and validating it, normalizing it to give companies basically explainable data that is granular and they can go operationalize. And we have an end-to-end software system to take the data and use it across their whole company. So it's an enterprise-wide solution. We're partnered with Salesforce, SAP, some e-signature companies. Clients right now include 3 banks, each over $1 trillion in assets, and a bunch of high growth companies. My time's up, but that's my key points. I'm happy to talk about our team if folks have questions about it.
That was beautifully on time, Neil. You really nailed it, and a great pitch, and appreciate you sharing some more information about Contract Wrangler. We'd love to throw it over to the judges for any questions about the company. Maybe Perry, since you got the last question on the last one, if you have anything to kick it off.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is, can you talk a little bit about the team? And then number 2 is, I have looked at the space. It seems like a relatively crowded space. So I wonder how you position yourself to the rest of the players in the market, and where you see yourselves in that stack.
Sure. So starting in order there, we have 2 different technology streams in the company. One is software engineering. Our software engineering stack is really built into two different main work areas. One is a client-facing application. So it's more than just, I have artificial intelligence and I found something in a contract. It's what is an enterprise application to go deliver this to clients and to actually take the data and then operationalize it in various parts of the company, be it sales, procurement, et cetera. That's one part. The other part of the software stack is internal tools that we use to go train the machine learning. So head of engineering, 20 years leading engineering teams in Silicon Valley. And then there's the data science part of our team. And our CTO leads that. CTO finished his PhD in computer science around 1994 at UCSD. His dissertation was on text analytics. So ever since that time, since 1994, 26 years, he's been working in text analytics at a variety of different companies. He holds 4 patents in the field, and he's got a lot of deep experience. He has a data science team that reports to him. And then there's an operations team, which is led by basically a senior attorney. And we have at this point 20-something additional attorneys who are training the system and QCing it. So that's the first part in terms of the technology component of the delivery of the team. It's important to know from our management perspective, head of sales, built all the enterprise sales at SurveyMonkey, CEO of the company, has been 20 years leading B2B SaaS companies in Silicon Valley. Basically, everyone in their role has done it before many times at high growth companies that have had good exits. In terms of really the differentiation and where do we fit and is it a crowded space or not, I'd say you got to step back, number one, and say, okay, well, who has contracts? Well, like every company in the world. So it's a gigantic marketplace. It's not like I just address hair salons or something like that. And it's actually quite an undercrowded market in real life if you want to step back and look at the stats, because they've done surveys of companies and asked, do you know what's in your contracts? And even the largest companies, most of them have no idea at all. So now, for those who focus on AI, of course, you're going to hear AI news, this AI, that AI, et cetera. But really, that probably represents, if you took all the AI players together, represents less than 1% of the market. But let's drill down on the AI side of the world. What's special about what we're doing is we actually have attorneys in the loop, and they are our attorneys. We're not just throwing this out to the hordes, because those of you who've worked with attorneys have probably experienced that. I know it's shocking, but attorneys don't always agree with each other. And you actually have to control the trainers of the system if you really want to go get anywhere. Otherwise, you end up with just a jumbled mess out there. And it's really an end-to-end system that we have, because we're controlling the annotators, and we're able to study things like inter-annotator agreement, that we can actually get down to a level of specificity and say, oh, here's the answer. It's 30 days, not just saying, oh, I have a clause classifier, look over here. So I'd say that, what does that mean in practicality is we're giving actionable answers. We're not just pointing you in a direction for you to spend more time yourself.
And I think we have time for one more judge question. If Juan or Jennifer, you have a particularly pressing question for Neil.
I can jump in. My question, Neil, is as you look at this being sold into general counsel's offices, where do you see the bulk of activity, or is there a bulk of activity around type of contract? Is it mostly focused on sales and revenue optimizing contracts, or has it been more used within procurement?
We've seen we've really seen both, and so our conversations with companies are, where's your pain point? And these days, obviously, one of the key pain points is I want to go save money. So they are definitely looking at their procurement agreements right now. But we have had some sales leaders come to us as well and say, hey, I'm missing out on chances to go upsell or create more revenue. Fortunately for us, from an AI and training perspective, the types of data you find across multiple agreement types, be it sales or procurement, are often similar. You have party names, effective dates, expiration dates, certain key terms, et cetera. So we actually have learning across many contract types. But indeed, we have to start with the business problem, just as you're discussing, and then we got to connect to the business system that does that. And we've got to get the interface set for that type of user, be it a salesperson or a procurement person.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the questions from the judges. I think we have time for one quick live audience question. Looks like we have Ishan Misra here for a question for Neil.
Hey, Neil, how's it going? Thanks for your pitch. My question is actually a bit of a follow-up to the previous question around the nature of contracts. But my question is more around, is there a solution, or are there plans for a solution to help before you actually engage in the contract, to kind of help set the terms or negotiate terms in a more objective way, given that you have, all the data from executed contracts and savings from those?
Yeah, we actually have we have a new feature coming out, which is a clause library. And what it enables companies to do is it enables them to, as they're reading contracts, to basically say, aha, I like the way this is worded. I'm going to go save it. I can later use that in contract generation. So we're starting to create a feedback loop now. And if you've negotiated deals, you probably have noticed that your negotiating power varies in certain circumstances. Sometimes you're a little company, you're doing a deal with Walmart. Okay, well, I'll take whatever contract they have. In other cases, maybe you've got some bargaining power, and that can affect which contract clauses you use. So this is really the first time that companies have been able to benchmark what is my existing corpus of contracts, what are the clauses I like, what are the ones I don't like, and then how can I use those in drafting my new agreements.
Got it. That's really interesting. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much, Neil. Really appreciate learning some more about Contract Wrangler. And with that, we're ready to move on to our third pitch. It's my pleasure to ultimately welcome BodyBlock AI to the virtual stage. You're looking good and ready to go, Greg.
And you guys can hear me, right? I just got a note about unmiking. Yeah. Okay.
You're coming through loud and clear.
Cool. Perfect. All right. So my name is Greg Moore, and I'm here to present BodyBlock, which is a Fit3D brand. And we're basically helping apparel brands and retailers prevent returns. And we'll talk about how we do that. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to give a story here. So I was sitting at a Fortune 500 apparel company, multi-billion-dollar brand, and I was talking to their CMO, their CEO, and their CTO, and I was asking them to tell me a little bit about the dimensions of the shoppers of the shoppers' bodies, basically the people who are buying their clothing, right? And they all looked at each other and like, we have no idea. We've never really thought about integrating the body dimensions of our shoppers into our company. This is a company that produces apparel, right? It's made to fit the body. And so because this has been a challenge, there's about $300 billion every single year that is lost profits due to returns. And so we took a survey of a bunch of consumers, thousands of consumers, and about 50% of people said they plan to return apparel before they even buy it. 50% will not return to a brand if their first fit experience is bad. And then as we survey actual body dimensions of customers and the sizes of clothing, we find that 92% of clothing do not fit the general consumer out there. So in order to solve this problem, we did a really interesting thing. So we basically said we need to really understand the human body, and then we need to be able to seamlessly predict the dimensions of the human body such that we can integrate that into solutions. And so on the left here, you see a 3D body scanner, which we've deployed to 55 countries, thousands of scans, millions of human bodies. This is basically a profitable proprietary data collection solution. And as Jennifer had mentioned in part of the panel discussion, is that the ability to collect and aggregate data in an efficient manner helps AI in every single capacity. And then furthermore, recently we have developed the ability to predict human body measurements from 7 questions, right? It's the most accurate in the world. It's been validated by a lot of different companies, as well as our own validation engines as well. And so we put this into work in a myriad of ways to help solve the problems that we're looking to solve. The first way is that we have developed an e-commerce size and fit recommendation solution. We use our body prediction technology to predict the shopper's body measurements. We then align that with the product or the clothing that they're looking at. And then we can recommend the best fit as well as tell them how it's going to fit their body. And the imagery on the left side is basically running through that process. So it's very quick, very efficient. Furthermore, when we look at that, just that piece alone has an immediate ROI for our customers. They see about a 3 times increase in conversion for people that use it versus those that don't, 30% reduction in returns, 11% higher cart value, and customers are confident in the size, especially new customers going to a new brand. So that for us is the tip of the iceberg in that capacity, right? The resulting data from this goes back into the funnel for these businesses and helps them size, basically create different patterns for the shoppers' bodies, helps them manage inventory for the shoppers' bodies based on territory and locations. And then we have the ability to target ads or help them basically target ads to shoppers based on body shapes. You can think about this as enhancing full value sell-through. Very, very interesting. We've got an executive team that's amazing. We've done this. We've got over 80 years of experience. We've started multiple companies. We've successfully exited multiple companies. And we've also had folks that have done it through every different capacity that we need. We've signed a bunch of customers from, really fast growing brands like Cuts Clothing and Rowan to the biggest brands in the world like Nike and PVH that are all integrating the solutions currently. And I'm going to end the pitch with a quote. I'm just going to read it, which I kind of hate doing, but at the same time, from a differentiation perspective, is just the most amazing thing. As BodyBlock provided solutions to enhance sizing and fit strategies throughout our entire company. Their body data and AI foundation allows them to evolve faster than any other company. And this is from PVH, a multi-billion-dollar brand. With that, I know my time is up. I think I'm over by a few seconds, but I appreciate it. So thank you. And I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. And thanks for sharing some more information about BodyBlock. I still am fighting getting on one of those 3D scanners because I'm so
Well, the beautiful thing is now you don't have to. You can just predict it.
Equally terrifying for myself. Would love to throw it to any of our judges if you have questions about BodyBlock. Perry or Jennifer or Juan?
Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead, Juan.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I guess two things. One, you mentioned that the data that you used to train your model was collected profitably. I guess I'd like to understand more about that. And then also, I don't know that you mentioned what the business model was. How are your customers that you're engaged with right now paying you?
Yeah, great questions. So the Fit3D part of the business is we deploy 3D body scanners to businesses within the wellness industry, right? And so those body scanners are used to track body morphology. We essentially sell them into the industry. The businesses that we sell them to use them to help their customers reach their goals, essentially, whether that's body shape changes, weight loss, posture balance, physical therapy, chiro, pregnancy tracking, whatever. And then by contract, we maintain ownership of all of the data that comes off of those systems. And we maintain access to the users. And so we can survey them and ask them questions and build up a lot of the prediction inputs such that we can build the models and continue to increase the accuracy of the body dimension predictions. So that business is profitable. We have the largest body scan network in the world. It's collecting the most data in the world. It's like 50 times bigger than the next biggest solution, and it's growing really fast. And so that's from that perspective. From the question number two, the businesses that integrate BodyBlock Recommend will pay us a monthly fee as well as a transaction cost. So every time it's used, it's a couple cents on the transaction, right? And we've basically built out our charge model to be about a 10x ROI for the companies based on the integration. So that goes back to the immediate ROI that they see the moment that they integrate, right? Trying to diminish any barriers of entry that our customers generally see. And then that, like I said before, is the tip of the iceberg. And so we have analytics platforms that take in all the data that we're producing from there, and then they can access that through different realms, right? So your technical design team is going to have access to the dimensions of the bodies, the size constructs of the clothing. They can make decisions on that. Same with inventory teams and supply teams. And then on the marketing side, we aggregate all that data with all the digital attribution. So we know where people are coming from, what those body shapes are. And so the marketing team can use this information again to hyper target ads based on that. So that's generally our charge model.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more judge question if Jennifer or Perry have anything pressing.
Perry, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm just
Go ahead.
to get a little bit more information. It's like you haven't really talked about that much about the retailers or the customers and how they're, where is this sort of in priorities of what they're trying to do, and who are you talking to get a deal done, and what's their reaction been to date?
Yeah, this is a great question, especially with COVID. I think Juan touched on this in the panel, but he mentioned that fashion is essentially reinventing itself, right? And it has to do so to stay alive. And so we generally sell the solution. Our champion within each business is either the VP, director, or manager of the e-com channel. And so from that perspective, then we'll go in, we'll focus on them as the champion. We'll then expand to the other VPs and the other bits of the organization to really gain a lot of steam and momentum. I think that, if you were to ask me this question in January, I'd say that, everybody had the transition to digitization and to e-com on their roadmaps for probably the next year to 5 years. And that can be anything from integrating 3D in the design side to integrating AI on the supply chain side, to the merch side, right? As well as looking at e-com tools to create efficiencies there. I think that I know that COVID has accelerated those timetables to 3 to 6 months as opposed to 1 to 5 years. And so from a right time, right place perspective, I hate to benefit from a pandemic, but it is, these retail companies understand that this way of shopping is going to be a bigger piece of the future. And if they don't create the tools, don't integrate the tools that prevent people from just using their e-com experience as a fitting room, they're going to waste all of the profits gained by the efficiencies of e-commerce. And so we've increased in the stack and the roadmap quite substantially due to some of the times.
How do people measure your value, Greg? Or how will these e-commerce people be looking to measure your value? Is it a reduction in the number of returns? Because I think my concern is if you're measuring mostly people who are going into fitness places, even though they come in all different shapes and sizes, you've got a certain subset of people, and then you have a limited set of patterns. So you can match people. It may still say this is the best pattern within this brand, and it can still fit horribly because that somehow the link has to be made back to the patterns and to the design.
Yeah, that's right. So one is the first question we get all the time, right? Is who is the data point? Where do you get your data? Our data is the largest set in the world. So Census comes to us to check it basically. From that perspective, however, when we look at like other tools like NHANES or BMI scales or whatever that may be, we're literally on point with the general data set for consumers. So our data has parity and one-to-one matching with the body shapes that you would expect walking around the world. So from a prediction standpoint, we don't necessarily have any biases in that, and we've got tons of tools to look at that. From the second standpoint, yeah, there's a lot of complexities associated with predicting a body and then aligning that to the size constructs of a brand and then recommending the appropriate size. And so the way that our customers look at us from a value standpoint is an increase in conversions, a reduction in returns, and especially a reduction in first-time shopper returns, because that's where they have the highest returns numbers. And that's because you don't know your sizing going to a new brand. So we basically take that selection completely out of the realm and we make it math. And because we're so good at the math that we do, we generally affect all of those numbers quite well.
Thank you so much, Greg, and really appreciate the questions from our judges. We have time for one more live audience question. I think we're joined by Shantanu right now.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for talking through what you guys are doing. Really great stuff. Totally see the value that you guys are adding here. Just a couple quick things. One, around sustainability. Do you see yourself growing in that area where you can promote sustainability in fashion? And second, around kind of what you guys have been doing already in terms of if you have any metrics of a number of returns that have been reduced or so similar value proposition that your customers have gotten. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that focus is always a challenge. I think when you think about the waste that comes from returns, the CO2 emissions, the packaging, the manpower needed to process stuff, the rewashing of things to sort of repurpose them and resell them, or not selling through your entire inventory. I mean, Burberry had a huge story about how much money they wasted in product and they just burned it to try to keep their market value high. So yeah, I mean, from a sustainability standpoint, we are absolutely making a dent, and we hope to make a bigger and bigger dent. I think that from the fashion apparel industry, I think that's a top line narrative. But right now, I think that, keeping a company afloat and alive and growing and trying to merge back into profitability is probably the bigger narrative for them. So, when things start to get back to, some bit of normal, then we will probably further highlight the sustainability quotients that we've been tracking ourselves. The second question, I'm gaffing on that run right now.
Any ROI metrics on returns?
Yeah, perfect. So I don't know if you guys can still see my screen, but I just popped back to the metrics that we're tracking right now. So we track every bit of the process as well as integrate with returns providers like Loop and Returnly and Happy Returns, right? And so we're generally seeing, again, about a 3x increase in conversion, 11% higher cart value by using our system, and then about a 30% reduction in returns due to improper sizing. I think one of the other really big things here, and I know my time is probably very close to up, so I'll go quickly, is that, again, when you think about this data in a shell, it's important and valuable. But when you think about how it impacts the rest of the cycle, it creates seasons of profitability and expansion every single time the data is used in the next step of the business cycle. So you're creating a flywheel of efficiency for these brands, which is really, really valuable.
Thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate the perspective on the future of fashion.
Yeah,
with that, we're ready to transition to our fourth pitch, and we'll get started with Market Muse.
Hi, everyone. I upgraded Zoom in advance of this call, and I don't have permissions to share my slides, so I'm going to do this without slides, but you don't need the slides because you're going to understand exactly what we do. My name is Aki. I co-founded Market Muse. We're an AI platform for content marketing. Now, many of you might already know this, but writing content for SEO to drive an inbound lead funnel is actually the predominant form of demand generation for 54% of marketers, especially marketing in tech. So if your product is using AI to analyze contracts, you're going to want to write content about it, because people, when they're searching for related terms, you're going to want to come up in Google. But the problem is over 80% of content that is created doesn't perform. It just kind of, gets left out in the wash. It doesn't really stand out. So what we're building is the first programmatic content platform. And the way it works is essentially we analyze all the content on the web and run a branch of science called topic modeling on it to build what we call knowledge graphs, which are essentially outlines of, if you're going to write about a topic, how does the best content, having analyzed tens of thousands of articles on the web on that topic, how does the best content talk about it, and how does that compare to your content? We essentially analyze pages and topics, and we analyze your entire website to measure what topics are you about and where do you have topical gaps that you should fill. Then our engine uses that topic modeling system to build that outline, and you can either send it to a freelancer writer, or we have a new product where the AI just writes a draft of the content for you, you publish, and off you go, and you can measure the impact through search. As one example, Serta, the mattress company, they commissioned an agency to build a site called Tomorrow Sleep. That site used MarketMuse and grew from 4,000 monthly inbounds to 400,000 in a year. They spent about $500,000, and they beat out Casper in many searches, and Casper spends over 50 million. So that's a significant ROI. On average, our customers see about a 2 to 6x lift in traffic within 6 months. We service over 150 customers, average deal size of 23,000, and so we're at around 4 million ARR. And we also recently, in February, launched a free product. So all of you can go to marketmuse.com and sign up and try the free content analysis and content optimization tools. We made it free for 3 months during COVID to help COVID-affected businesses. But you can't see the logos, of course, but we sell to publishers like Thomson Reuters, enterprises like the Home Depot, content marketing teams such as the startups here, and marketing agencies. There are 4 packages. Again, you can't see it, but they range from 18,000 to 60,000 a year, as well as the introductory product at 5,000 a year. They're differentiated based on how many credits you purchase. So the more credits, the more AI-generated content you can buy, and the more the larger websites you can analyze. The competitors in our space typically are agencies that do this by hand. So they're sort of co-op editors. They both purchase the product and they provide this service without AI automation. And so when we find them in a competitive deal, of course, we look to install our system in their stack to help them perform. It's a $27 billion market. And we're essentially a founding team of search experts and enterprise software experts. This year, we're growing from 3.7 to 7.1, but COVID hit us, so we're going to be at 5.5, and next year grow to close to 10.
Thank you so much, Aki. Really enjoyed learning about MarketMuse and the opportunities around AI content generation. Would love to throw it to any of our judges. I don't know, Perry, if you have an initial question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how do you get your customers? What's the cost of acquisition, and how fast do you return capital on that acquisition cost?
Yeah, great question. So we've never paid for marketing or for ads. So everything we do is inbound driven. Today, my co-founder held a presentation at the Product-Led Growth Summit, and I'm of course here, shamelessly plugging away. So we generate about 2,500 inbound leads a month on average. Fluctuates, of course, with seasonality, but that's just been growing over time because there's a virality loop. When we sell to marketers, content marketers, they eventually write content about us, and so we expand. Our typical CAC payback is, depending on the deal, the size, it's 6 to 9 months in a typical time frame. Right now, it's been our metrics got a little wonky with COVID, but since we launched this self-service $5,000 a year platform, we've just been funneling demand to that, even when businesses don't have a lot of budget to engage on a larger deal.
Any additional questions from Juan or Jennifer?
First question is just, are you eating your own Kool-Aid or drinking your own Kool-Aid, using your stuff to generate those leads? And then the second question is, have you been through enough cycles that you can see the stickiness, that once somebody gets the lift from your solution, are they continuing to use it, and how do they expand?
Yes, great questions both. On our blog, we published over 200 articles. They get very, very, very specific around terms like user intent profiling and so on. But on each of those articles, you can see the MarketMuse content score and why it is the best article in that space. We've even ranked actually for a competitor's terms. So if you search BrightEdge versus Conductor, we come up. So go figure. But we absolutely eat our dog food. We haven't yet generated large volumes of AI content about Market Muse, but that'll be the next step. We're just launching that. We have an alpha product in the generation space. In terms of stickiness, it's been a really interesting dynamic. Essentially, we went to market serving large enterprises, and we found that some enterprises don't really rely on search content. They just go and buy TV ads. So we've been able to stay in all of our enterprise accounts, but where we see actually the most stickiness are Series A, Series B, early stage companies where they're, dgraph, for example, an open source GraphQL database where they need to write content, technical content, and they don't have another, channel that is as performant or as efficient as inbound. So we've been extremely sticky in the enterprise SaaS category.
Wonderful. I think we have time. Oh, thanks, Jennifer. We have time for one quick question from the audience, and this is coming from Jack. He was wondering, what are some of the quantitative metrics that show how Market Muse has enabled users to improve their content marketing and competitive advantage?
Yep, great question. So we measure traffic and rankings. For top of the funnel metrics, we measure what your traffic and your rankings boost is basically on a URL by URL basis for new content that was published and for existing content that was optimized. How does the traffic improve and how do your keyword positions improve? We then use that to derive your page traffic value. So what dollar value do you generate? So for example, for a recent publisher on tech news, their smartphone section had 700 articles, but if they write these 75 additional articles on the iPhone 11 and hook it to those other articles in a specific way, it'll generate about 500,000 of value based on the organic traffic. So we use those metrics. In terms of engagement, pipeline, and revenue, we don't have automated tracking set up yet, but once we can connect Google Analytics and Omniture and so on, we'll actually be able to measure even paid, lift on CPMs and so on. So absolutely the intent is to measure dollar contribution to pipeline and revenue.
Very interesting and exciting. And what was the lowest price point that a startup can get engaged with Market Muse?
Right now it's free for the first month and then $325 a month after with an annual plan. And we're actually, maybe I shouldn't say this, but we're about to launch an even lower tier that can get you in for as low as $79 a month to get you started as an individual, so you can take it to your buying team and go from there. We launched that product, Market Muse Pro, in February because previously only larger companies and larger budgets could work with us. And now we've transitioned to a product-led growth company with that new offering. So everything that you could not see in the slides here, you can actually just see on our site and in the product itself, rather than kind of listening to me talk about it.
Awesome. I'm sure you'll be hearing from some of the startups that are watching right now over the next couple of days. Thank you again for the presentation. It was a real pleasure learning about Market Muse. Next, we have our second to last pitch, and we're getting ready for Pathology Watch. You look great. You're good to go, Pathology Watch.
Okay, great. So my name is Dan Lambert. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pathology Watch, and we do deep learning for pathology diagnostics. Overall, the market size, 17 billion a year spent specifically in pathology labor, and that's growing. Approximately 45% of the countries in the world right now don't have access to basic cancer diagnostics. And that's one of the big problems that we're trying to solve. We have two major competitors that have kind of come into the space and have focused primarily on the inpatient or hospital market. That's a very long sales cycle. We decided to focus on the outpatient market and specifically on dermatopathology, which is a $3.2 billion global market opportunity. It's primarily outsourced by labs and dermatologists and hospitals. A lot of the market right now is run by Quest and LabCorp. It's also one of the most underserved markets in pathology. So how does it work? You go into the physician's office, you get a biopsy that's taken if there's a spot that looks funny. That sample is FedEx to our central lab. We gross the sample and prepare the slide. We put that into a digital scanner so that this is one of the first times that pathology has been digitized generally. The AI identifies the cancers and then generates the doctor's note automatically. That report is then automatically sent into the dermatologist's electronic medical record system, and they're able to actually view the image instead of having to wait for a glass slide to be shipped back to their office. There are three major advantages for the dermatologist in this process. One is their ability to see the image and talk to the pathologist about the image. Secondly, they're not having to deal with fax machines and microscopes and all of the data entry that comes along with that. And then third, going digital allows access to the AI as well as a network of really expert dermatopathologists for that rare melanoma. We're the best known algorithm in dermatopathology right now. Our trial results are that the sensitivity is 100% as it needs to be. With about a 5% false positive rate. Sometimes the tumors generate extra inflammation that the algorithm still picks up as a false positive. This is a significant performance improvement over typical pathologists, and we're continuing to solve a number of other cancer lines right now. Our strategy here is software eats pathology. We start by digitizing all of these outpatient clinics, taking these images and allowing the dermatologist to see them. We apply the AI to the sample volume over time, jumping the margin from 12% to 72%. And then over time, the way that healthcare payers work, if we're able to offer them a discounted rate to United Healthcare or Aetna, et cetera, we can push exclusivity through our laboratory as well as our AI processes. Briefly on the team, I'm both the CEO and CTO. I have over 50 million in prior startup exits. This is my third venture-backed startup. It was class of 2011 HBS, and I worked on the IBM Watson team. My partner, Greg Osmond, is one of the top 10 dermatopathologists in the country, also trained at Harvard and practiced at Brigham and Women's. And then my third co-founder is Michael Torno. He built a lab business called Viracor and sold it for approximately 200 million to Eurofins. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Great to learn a little bit more about Pathology Watch. Would love to throw it over for our judges. Maybe we'll start with Perry if you have any questions.
Sure. Can you explain at the end of the day, it's all about how you get paid in the healthcare industry. So I'm just curious, how's that process going? I wasn't quite sure if you were being paid by the provider or the insurance entity.
Yeah, we're reimbursed for both the professional component and the technical component by the payers, specifically by insurance. We have insurance coverage, some that we've won on our own, and then some that we've partnered with, like Cedars-Sinai, Poplar, Unipath, to have access to their insurance contracts. So we're able to bill in approximately 40 out of the 50 states right now, which I think it's a very significant competitive moat. And we do have traction. We're at about a $1.4 million run rate in terms of an annualized run rate in terms of insurance payables right now.
Any other questions from Juan or Jennifer?
Go ahead, Juan.
Well, thank you. Sure. Thank you, Dan, for your presentation. I guess I'd love to understand what other alternative target markets you guys are considering. Certainly, this one is certainly a good initial target market, and it sounds like one that you guys know well. But would love to understand if there are others. You sort of mentioned others that you may be focusing on in the future. I'd love to understand what those are and how big those markets are.
Yeah, so great question. The outpatient market overall is approximately $8 billion a year total. So that includes OBGYN, outpatient GI, podiatry, some nephrology. It starts to it starts to move into all of the specialties that you can go see a doctor inside of a clinic. That's where our model really works. So we have a pretty wide open market to go after. And as far as we know, we're the only ones that are actually going after the outpatient clinics. And that, incidentally, that's actually how Quest and LabCorp started growing their businesses 30 plus years ago.
Could you talk a little bit about what the hurdle will be to enter those other markets? Because right now you have a good data set in derm, you have the model built. What does it take to aggregate that type of data in some of these other places if you go there next? And the second question is, how do you go to market today? Is it like clinic by clinic, outpatient, PE firms that own a bunch of them? How are you doing that?
Yeah, actually both really great on questions that focus on that hit on the most important aspects of this business. It takes approximately 30,000 extractions of cancer images to actually solve a single cancer line. And so we raised enough capital to basically get us through dermatopathology. Additional capital raises to accumulate other data. The beauty of our business model, though, is that we can go in and digitize, say, OBGYN or GI, and have that be digitized for a year or two, collect that data, and then build the AI on that, and then apply the AI to our own samples. We believe that our thesis is that the winner in pathology AI is the company that can simultaneously control the AI and all of the algorithms for the different specialties, but at the same time be able to bill insurance for those cases. We don't think that the companies that are just building an algorithm and then licensing it, they're not capturing the bulk of the margin, which is the labor cost takeout here. So I think that addresses the first question, and sorry, the second, there was a second part to that question.
Second question was go to market. Clinic to outpatient. Clinics can be hand-to-hand combat. How do you do that with some scale? Is it through the PE firms that own a bunch of them? How are you?
Yeah, so to start, we kind of focus on those dermatology clinics that are like 3 to 7 dermatologists. Private equity has maybe about 20% of the market. We probably don't work with them until we've finished out building all of the AI. In the meantime, we can start making optimizations in our own lab and in our own footprint. We hire basically ex-pharma and med device reps that have Rolodexes of dermatology clinics, and they move through those pretty quickly. So we just started selling last year, and we have probably 25 clinics that are ready to be implemented, or that are on the waiting list. So getting demand on that individual clinic basis has not been a problem. And in some ways, COVID has pushed us to web conferencing. And so those reps are just, they're on web conference calls all day with these dermatologists.
Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate you sharing some more information about Pathology Watch, and excited to see what comes next for the company. With that, we're ready to move on to our final presentation. And last but not least, it's really excited to welcome Microtech.
Good evening, everybody. So as the former chief technology officer of multiple oil and gas firms, I started Microtech with the question, what if? What if we were to take this archaic industry and reduce the leaks and the risks that are associated with it? What if we were to be proactive rather than reactive? Being a statistics guy, I obviously took the numbers, and what you find is that there's over $30 billion lost industry-wide due to just revenue leaks, which means that the average operator is hosting 93 leaks every single year. And this $30 billion hemorrhage doesn't just includes revenue. It doesn't include the PR damage, litigation, cleanup fees, and fines that are associated with these disasters. Closer to my heart, the environmental impact. And what case studies of recent leaks and leaks of decades past have taught us is even the largest leaks take hours, days, even weeks to discover. And furthermore, when we look at the international oil and gas market, the majority of extremist funding comes from black market oil and gas, where these bad guys are tapping into the pipelines, siphoning off the commodities, and then reselling them on the black market. Intelligence experts estimate that this is as high as 70% of their funding source. In the United States, there's more than 2.6 million miles of pipeline, and thousands of miles are added to this network every single year. If we take this number and divide by the number of federal and state inspectors, we find that there's more than 4,500 miles between each inspector. They simply cannot keep up. And when we also consider that the average age of a pipeline is over 50 years old in this country, you begin to understand that this infrastructure is just rotting away beneath our feet. So what can we do about it? Well, what we've created is an all-in-one technology that measures the 7 most important variables to pipeline longevity. Factors such as corrosion, pressure, density, vibration, temperature, geolocation, and acoustics. We transmit these variables at speeds up to 42 times every second through a patented technology stack that's been evaluated by the likes of Chevron, TechnipFMC, and Inotech Alberta. Once that data is collected, as I said, we transmit via 4G LTE, 3G, 2G, or then satellite to our cloud, where it's then analyzed time and time again through neural network-backed artificial intelligence, as well as your more classic mathematics models. One of the more beautiful things about our devices is that they're really easy to install. Simply add epoxy, attach solar for power, and antenna for wireless. And you place one of these devices once every 1 to 5 miles along the pipeline infrastructure. I like to give a real world example of how our technology works. And I like this example because humans can clearly see that a problem occurred here. And in this event, we sent out text message and email alerts to the operator to alert them that an excavator was digging on their line. This not only helped them save millions of dollars in lost product, but potentially save that excavator's life. And by merging this with artificial intelligence, by monitoring things like corrosion, the land slippage, and the other long-term variables that we do, we can predict these leaks out days, months, even years ahead of time. Furthermore, I'm a great believer in that this advanced data science should be accessible to any decision maker at the company. So we made an easy to understand graphic user interface where color-coded points, green, yellow, or red, indicate the severity of the threat. And you can break this out into all the charts and metrics that any operator would want. And we're a subscription service, which I know investors love, where we charge $3,000 per mile of pipeline that we analyze every single year. And we crush our competition. We monitor more variables. We monitor them far faster. We're fully wireless. We're externally mounted, use artificial intelligence, and we are a fraction of the price point. I'd love to talk to you all about the customers and the team, so please ask me more questions about that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us an introduction to Microtech. Would love to hand it off to any of our judges that have questions. Juan, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'd love to understand more about your customer traction. So if you can start with that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I can't go into a whole lot of detail because, you know, oil and gas companies are kind of nebulous on what deals they're making. But what I can tell you is that we're partnered with some of the largest oil and gas, you know, name an oil and gas company out there. We're probably working with them. And I can publicly tell you that we're working with Chevron and Acciona. So major players, some of the largest oil and gas companies in the world. As far as the team is concerned, I was a previous founder or co-founder of a big data startup, which I had my third successful exit from. Also, the 2 other oil and gas companies, which I exited from. We have Jeff Brashear, who is a business unit analytics manager at BAE Weapon System, and 6 other engineers, but also Mike Kaser, who's our CIO, where he was director at IGT, International Gaming Technologies, which is casino gaming, not like computer gaming. So high security, high risk assets.
And then just one quick question, I guess, on the sort of the accuracy of your predictive models. How have you been able to measure that accuracy over time? How many leaks have you actually predicted prior to them happening? That's the thing. I mean, how are you measuring the accuracy?
So yeah, we've actually alerted to a number of leaks previously, both the excavator example that I mentioned, but also things such as land slippage has been a big one for us, as our first customers were out of the Marcellus Shale Basin up in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, and Virginia. So we've had a lot of success with that. As far as our accuracy, we see the AI as the diagnostician for these alerts. So it identifies, if we see an anomaly, what the threat is. And so we've found that with projections that were 96% accurate in those decision-making processes.
Okay, thank you.
And it helps when we're taking in 1.2 billion data points every single day by January. So.
Any questions from Perry or Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the dynamics are with, with pricing and buying power, because I'm guessing there's not that many customers. So how do you end up getting a good price for your efforts?
Yeah, so there's about 2,000 operators in the United States. Everybody knows of the large ones. For a variety of reasons, we've been more attractive to the larger firms, the ones who have more to lose and more risk profile. And so in partnering with those firms, the typical sales cycle in this industry is anywhere between 12 and 24 months. Our typical sales cycle is about 4 months. So a lot of our customers are, pretty much cold calling us at this point. It's pretty exciting.
And I guess we have one time for one final question from the audience. We have a question from Leanne. How does your projected 96% accuracy compare to other alternatives that the industry is currently using?
So the others, it's always bad to say you don't have competition, right? There is nobody doing AI on first party data that they're collecting. And with us owning the data, it becomes a powerful tool for us and really an asset. So when we look at our competition, we go back to that competition slide. We're measuring 7 variables, they're measuring 1. We measure those variables at speeds up to 42 times a second. They're measuring once every 15 minutes. They can't even transmit this data wirelessly without third-party tools being added to their systems. And nobody else is doing analytics, much less artificial intelligence on this data that they're bringing in. So our competition is weak because they haven't adapted since the 1970s. And I sometimes make the joke that, if more people knew how pipelines were run, it would be more concerning to people, frankly.
Thank you so much. It's, hopefully we'll prevent the next big leak or, disaster. And it's great to know that folks like yourself are kind of going after these big, challenging opportunities. So thank you again, Mead.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, that was our final pitch. We heard from 6 incredible startups here tonight. And now we're simply going to ask for 2 to 3 minutes as we tally the scores. And we'll be back before you know it with our winner. We'll talk to you in one moment. Hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for waiting around with us and giving us some time to manage the judging and evaluation process. But we are ready to go. This was an amazing AI pitch night. Again, such a pleasure having this great group of founders, judges, and really incredible conversation going on. I think this is just the start of many virtual pitch nights that we'll be hosting here at GSV Labs, and we hope you join us, for the next round of pitch nights. But without any further ado, it is my pleasure to share the winner from tonight's pitch night. Again, as a reminder, this company is winning $2,000, or actually, I'm sorry, we'll be doing our winner's choice, or our runner-up. I'm sorry, I've got the order all messed up. Our grand prize winner tonight for $2,000 in prizes and a one-on-one mentoring session with Perry Wu is Pathology Watch. Again, congratulations to the Pathology Watch team. Really exciting work that they're doing, tackling the future of cancer diagnostics and treatment. And with that, our audience choice runner-up that will be receiving the $500 prize and kudos from all of our audience members is Microtech. Again, really exciting, interesting opportunities, trying to make oil and traditional energy pipelines safer and preventing those really tragic and devastating environmental spills, as well as costly impact for all of those stakeholders. So again, a virtual round of applause for our winner and all of our participating companies. Truly an amazing group of artificial intelligence companies that are making a big impact in the world. With that wraps up our AI pitch night. It's been great to have you here. Next August 19th, we'll be having our next virtual pitch night. It's a night for Black founders and entrepreneurs, where we'll be highlighting this community of underrepresented founders and really seeing kind of the seed and Series A companies that they're building. We have a phenomenal partnership with Ozy Media, a growing next generation media group, and Carlos Watson, the CEO of Ozy, will be joining us for that. If you take a look at the chat, you'll see our applications are live for the Black Founders Pitch Night, and we really are excited for anyone to apply and join. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see you on August 19th. Thanks again.